Okay, day 116, part 3, DynCorp Harvest. A lot of folks are asking, how did all this start? How did all this sex trafficking and the viruses and the organ harvesting and all these rat lines get going in the first place? So this is going to be the little bit of history back, the background of this. DynCorp is created almost simultaneously with the CIA. And it's known as a proprietary. Like in spy operations, you need to have some things provided. Like, for instance, you're always going to need an air force. You're always going to need helicopters, as helicopters were developed. You're going to need banking. You're going to need places to stay for your spies and so forth. So those are called proprietaries. And then there's other things businesses CIA creates are called cutouts. Cutouts are just that. They're back at the Mina airport. They had a thing called parkometer, and they were supposedly making parking meters in the front. This is at Mina Airport in Arkansas. Of the front of the business, in the back of the business, they were making the nose cones for the planes to put the drugs in, bring the cocaine in. So that's why sometimes they're called CIA fronts, because there's kind of a legitimate business going on in the front. Maybe it's only one person taking orders and then shipping a product every once in a while. But in the back is where all the action's going, where they're bringing in all the weapons and flying them down to for the Iran-Contras and then flying back the cocaine. Okay, so this all started by the CIA. I think you might have remembered when I was talking about the Knights of Malta and the passports, and how a diplomatic passport with the Knights of Malta would allow you to travel to any of one of these 110 different countries. Well, this is the perfect cover for a CIA agent. You don't want to say, I'm William Buckley Jr., hi, here's my American passport. That's pretty easy to track. So what you do is you take on a different identity, and then you travel around on the Maltese passport. This goes all the way back to when I was saying in the war, the Church of Rome, the Pope has played a role through the Knights of Malta ever since getting the Jews out of France and Eastern Europe. The Maltese Falcon was made about it, and the Casablanca was made about it. The Pope also played a very instrumental role in getting the Nazis out of Europe after the World War II into South America, mainly, some in Canada. And then you notice they don't have a right to issue passports for the United States. So that's why Frank Giustra and all the Giustra partners are in Canada. And then you see southern Sudan, South Africa, and then all over the Eastern Europe. So remembering that, now this is going to be a little bit of a mind blower for everyone who studied U.S. history. But there's this guy named Paul Helliwell, and he's a CIA agent. Or an architect, and he's a planner. And the plan is Alan Dulles wants to create a whole group of what they call gladios, these fighters. It was kind of based on the old werewolf plan. The werewolf plan for the German intelligence was you'd be a normal guy during the day wearing a suit, and then at night you would do these prowler type operations like the Secret Service does now. So that was the plan. So based on that old werewolf plan, you created these gladiators, and the operation was going to be called Operation Gladio. The only problem with Operation Gladio, and they were going to do about 630 of these gladios, there were going to be 12 to 14-man teams. The idea was that if the Soviet Union attacked, then these gladios would kind of come up at night, and they could do night operations and kill the Russians wherever they were encamped and so forth. That's the basic idea. The problem is the CIA had no money. So Helliwell comes up with this plan. It's called the Helliwell Plan, and it was the Christmas conference or the Havana conference in 1946. It was called Operation X. Now, you might have seen this in Godfather 2, where Lucky Luciano comes down and the Genovese family come down, and all the different crime families come to Havana, Cuba at this hotel, which is the Hotel Nacional. So the CIA implements this plan, and the idea is we'll use heroin, we'll start heroin drug trade into Harlem, give it to the black musicians and Asian immigrants in San Francisco and Los Angeles who have experienced heroin before. And it won't get out of control because it's going to stay in Harlem, basically. So Harlem, they use the Vatican Bank. The CIA used the Vatican Bank to launder the heroin trade money shipping to Harlem. And this is how the heroin trade started in the United States. a drug company named Schiaparelli, I misspelled it, would ship these oranges. They were, half of the oranges were real oranges, and the other half were wax oranges, and they were filled with cocaine. And that's how there was very little drug trade until this 1946 conference in the United States. But they were packed in Havana as the transshipment point, and they were put in these United Fruit, things, and then they came to these New York ports. It started out in New York, but then Miami and New Orleans were the two other major ports. And then the Teamsters, Jimmy Hoffa and all that, would get and move these all around the United States, just like the Teamsters moved during Prohibition for the mob. The Teamsters moved all the hooch, the whiskey from Canada and the rum from Puerto Rico and the Scotch from Scotland. So it was just a natural follow-on for the Teamsters. So Gladio funded this heroin trade, and the bagmen, the people, as you're moving money around, you've got to get the money back to the Bank of the Vatican somehow. It doesn't, go there by itself. And the international transfer system at that time was these Knights of Malta. These bagmen were basically the trade. Also correspondence, meetings, and so forth. You had to have free movement of people. So these Knights of Malta. So the Pope creates these Catholics in Action. This is where the basis of the Catholics in Action in the U.S. comes from. These are the revenge groups or whatever. These people are going to do sabotage and so forth, and intelligence collection in the U.S. And the CIA establishes this thing called the Vatican Desk. The Vatican Desk is to collect information from all these Gladio groups in Eastern Europe and so forth, and process all the information. So the money is being processed at the Vatican Bank, and the Vatican Desk is processing the intelligence. I know this seems outlandish, but it's actually what happened. And Joseph Korbel, Madeleine Albright's father, was that Gladio guy for Czechoslovakia. Okay, so it's kind of coming together here. So William Colby, James Angleton, William Casey, John McCone, these are all directors of the CIA. Okay, all these guys were Knights of Malta. At some point, you had to do your time in Eastern Europe moving this money around, and then these guys basically all go on to Vietnam, William Colby and so forth. William F. Buckley, Alexander Haig. So you can see Alexander Haig running the Iran-Contra, William F. Buckley doing a lot of the stuff for Korea and Vietnam. And then the original guy, Reinhard Gehlen, he was the one who ran the werewolf program. He was the German intelligence. He also was a Knight of Malta. So basically all that Alan Dulles did was co-opt the already existing German network of those werewolves, and he built on that. So So fast forward to this missing $6.5 trillion in our budget, and fast forward to the $240 billion missing in the NATO budget. All this, as I mentioned before, is the original Gladio program, which was funded by Operation X. So this funds Gladio, okay? But then Gladio B has been exposed by Sibel Edmonds. I believe there's a Gladio C, or whatever they're going to call it for the United States. I think it's JTTF, a Gladio D, etc. So there's 3 missing hidden treasury programs that we've identified in the DoD budget. So it's going to be one. It's going to have a name like Gladio. It actually, with Sibel Edmonds, they actually just named it Gladio B for Afghanistan and that whole trade. Starting with Brzezinski and the Mujahideen, basically the Mujahideen has been moved from Muslim country to Muslim country. It's the Muslim Brotherhood. It's the same thing. It just keeps getting moved around, Chechnya, Georgia, etc., to do all these operations. It's the same thing, Libya, and that's where the money is going. So it's just a matter of drilling down on that. Now, I do want to say one thing about Valerie Plame here. There was a golden age of intelligence and spying where we weren't relying on all this subterfuge and sabotage and blackmail and so forth, where we really were able to collect intelligence with just like one great Mata Hari. And we would know, like the Russians, would know what the general was thinking the day before he gave the order to his generals. This is the kind of intelligence, where you have a super highly trained operative that knows everything there is to know about the oil business or whatever their area of expertise is, and gathers the intelligence that way without all this killing and blackmail. It's just unnecessary, is what I think. And I think you get better intelligence that way. Of course, Chandelin is killed because the NATO countries are now doing this inspection of their budgets, and they find, oh, all this money's missing. So why is Haiti important? Why is this north part of Haiti important? Well, I'll tell you the story fairly quickly. Cuba was that transshipment point where they all met in that Havana conference. Of course, Cuba goes communist. What's the new transshipment point? The new transshipment point is right here for the Italian trade, or coming from Spain. So this is where Mark Rich picks up. The BCCI Bank is created by the Vatican Bank, and they just trade to Haiti. So you can look at all this USAID spending up here. It's just with the ports and so forth, Port Lafiteau and Port Cap-Haitien, all the comfort stuff is provided up here and so forth. It's just an extension of the CIA over the last, when this was established with the fall of communism in 1960 in Cuba. So all the wars since World War II have been heroin wars. So when we originally were using the Chinese, those Hmong people that I was telling you about, with that have moved to the United States now, they got moved out of China, so that's why we had the Korean War. They got moved out of Korea, or their supply, the rat line was cut, so we had so we moved to an operation in northern Laos. It was in Burma. We moved to Laos with Henry Kissinger, Operation Duck Soup. The whole Vietnam conflict was about heroin, and on and on. So, and then goes right into Iran-Contra. So you can really piece together the whole history of the United States very, very clearly and very cohesively and very coherently just by understanding the Havana Conference of 1946. Okay, I'm going to be doing the Richie Allen show here, I guess, in an hour or so. So that's going to be good to talk to Richie again.